Welcome to the Church Safety Guys broadcast with hosts James McGarvey, Paul Buckner, and Mike Scully. Together, they make up the Church Safety Guys. Their mission? To inspire, influence, and impact church safety teams. Join us for the next hour as we talk about all things church safety and security. Don't forget to like our Facebook page, join one of our church safety and security communities online, and share this broadcast with your church.
Well, good evening and welcome to the Sunday night broadcast of the Church Safety Guys. I am James and I am joined by my co-host this evening, Mike Scully.
How are you, James? I was like, you know what? You said my last name. I'm like, I can't remember the last time you actually said my last name on a broadcast. That's kind of funny.
I'm not sure how to take that exactly.
Because it's always Paul and Mike, and so I don't think it ever goes to last names like in a natural flow. So I couldn't pick up on it. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute.
and yet another challenge to make sure you're awake tonight.
Yeah, right. Well, I'm getting some sleep here and there. 3-hour bursts is really what it is.
Well, you guys, for those of you joining, welcome. If you're listening to this at a later time, feel free to click like and subscribe on that lower right-hand corner. And you can always visit us at churchsafetyguys.com for resources and information. If you missed last week, actually, has it been a whole week? That's
crazy.
Yeah.
Already.
So Mike is a new dad, and he has not gotten any sleep in the last week at all. But
some sleep, but yeah, you know what? I haven't had to. I've had a couple of weeks off at church, so that has never happened. So that part is good.
Your wife has been posting some amazingly cute photos of your daughter, and I don't always say that babies are cute, but you guys got a cute one, so I'll
appreciate that. I'd put that all in my wife's department.
Well, this evening we're going to talk about legal considerations for your church safety team. So if you're just joining us, feel free to like and share the broadcast, and also if you would go ahead and list what church you're with or listening, the area you're listening from. In the notes, and as we go through tonight, if you have questions, we'll try to get to that. But our guest this evening is Mr. Robert Bob Meter, and he is a Christian husband, father, police manager, practicing attorney, and part-time college professor. So he has a lot of free time. Not really. But he serves with me at my church. Some of his background, he grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, and wanted to see the world. So he joined the U.S. Air Force, where they immediately assigned him to the Garden Spot of Dayton, Ohio. And he served there 4 years as active duty military police officer, followed by 6 years active reserve. Then he went into while he was on active duty, he served at Wright-Patterson. He obtained his EMT, paramedic, and OPATA police certification. And then during that time, he volunteered as an EMT for the Butler Township Fire Department in Montgomery County, and later as a police officer in the village of Waynesville in Warren County. After separating from the Air Force, he worked for 2.5 years at the Ohio State University as a paramedic. He was a flight medic in the U.S. Air Force Reserves, flying on both C-130s and C-141s. Bob joined the Columbus Police Department in 1990, where he obtained both his undergraduate and law degrees from Capital University. And during his time with CPD, he has worked in patrol for 18 years, all but one of those years in inner city, and 10 of the 18 on third shift. He's been assigned to the legal unit as an aide to a deputy chief, undercover with the former street crime attack team, property crimes bureau, and 3 different assignments at the training bureau, currently in the communications bureau. Bob has a small law practice with a blog and is an adjunct professor at Franklin University. And he is married with 3 children. So I'll bring him in here. And hello, Bob. Thanks for joining us tonight. It's great to have you.
Happy Sunday.
I thought we were going to have to go to a break before you finished in his bio.
His credentials. Well, you know what? I am very thankful. The only thing I'm going to say is I'm very thankful that I consider Bob a good friend because we serve together at our church. And I'm very thankful I'm on the right side of the law. Because usually when I mention or have the opportunity to mention his name, which maybe we'll get into a little bit later if we have time, people kind of look at me and they're like, "Oh, you know that Bob Meter." So he is well known in his circles and outside of his circles. But I'm thankful that he's been a friend and we've served together for, I think, the last 10 years or so.
I believe that's about the right. We were trying to think about when I came on board, but yep, that's about accurate.
So definitely, for sure. So let's start off tonight. We just have some basic questions we're going to throw out there, and we'll talk more about the legality piece than necessarily law enforcement.
Sure.
But for churches that are new to the idea of a safety team or security team, what would you recommend, Bob, as far as the best place to start from a legal perspective?
Right. I think the very first thing that you have to do is you have to sit down with how is the church insured? And you have to sit down with your insurance company and figure out the best way to protect your church. We could talk about the violence, which is what you guys are trying to, make sure that, every church member can come to church, can worship and go home and do that safely. I mean, bottom line. And right now you only have to open up one news app, your local news app, a national news app, and you see the violence. You see the violence in your local community, you see it across the country, you see it around the world. We are in a very adversarial society, and it's not just violence. Why do you think we need so many attorneys? Because people always believe that they're harmed, and then they want to be compensated for that. You just think of every church has somebody that slipped and fell, or that they got injured at the kids program. In yesteryear, we would have taken the kid and got the kid checked out. It would never cross our mind to sue the church, but now that's a real concern. So when you're starting up a security team, you got to think about the worst case scenario, and the worst case scenario would be violence. But maybe secondarily to that, you're talking about the church, protecting the church legally. So you've got to go to your insurance company, and then I would look at that time, talent, and treasure. And we could talk about that later, about how we actually got connected physically at the church and how that interacted. But it was about the time, talent, and treasure. So maybe there's an attorney that attends church there that you can get some time, talent, or treasure out of that may help the process along the way. And if it's not that attorney, because that's not their field, then maybe they know people that they could exchange services for, or something along those lines. So to that end, I would begin with your insurance company, figure out, take some guidance from them as far as what expectations they have, and then you can start to build the program.
Sounds good. Mike, did you have anything you wanted to?
Yeah, I think from that perspective, it starts from I think churches that they think about their property. They think about their intellectual property. They think about their, initially probably from a risk mitigation that then rises to the level of physical violence and threats, to your point. So I think in the earliest stages, they always think about insurance. But are they thinking about insurance to mitigate against less probable potential scenarios. And that's where we're seeing folks that watch the broadcast, that reach out to us for coaching. And I think certainly, I think if we start from a risk mitigation perspective, insurance and the law are two ways to protect yourself on paper, even before you even put somebody there with a firearm to protect the physical property.
Sure. And
go ahead, Bob.
go ahead.
I was just going to say, what, a firearm isn't the end all be all of church security? What?
Right. And when you're looking at protecting the church from those types of claims, you think of a very real scenario of somebody who attended church that they don't want to attend church there because they're causing disruption, or in the very real scenario of the couple that has split, and the child's there, and then it's usually the estranged father. I mean, that's normally the run of the mill, but it could be the estranged mother. I think we had one going on with a grandparent at church that wasn't allowed to be around the kids. So then they come in, and then you tell them that they got to leave, and then they don't want to leave, and then that could certainly result in a lawsuit.
Yep, for sure.
I love that, the idea of reaching out to your insurance company, because honestly, I'm actually I'm actually helping a church in Columbus right now that they're trying to change their insurance carrier because they're when they went to them and asked them to set up a security team, basically, the insurance agent said, well, if you're going to do that, then we're going to raise your premiums. I think it was like $400 per person in that ministry volunteering on that team. And so he came to me and he said, hey, do you know of any great companies in Central Ohio that take care of churches? And I said, absolutely. Actually, we have one that helps sponsor our broadcast and whatnot. But it's always amazing to me. Like, people want to jump into the training aspect of it. So let's train. Let's set all this stuff up. Let's do this. And a lot of times, one of the first questions I'll say is, well, have you had a conversation with the church attorney or the church insurance company? And I get the deer in the headlights look where, they're just like, no. And I'm like, well, you know what? They're real living, breathing people. So pick up the phone and call them and just say, hey, I'm trying to do this with the church. What's covered, what's not. And that helps out a lot, because it clears your mind and gives your mind ease, because, basically because of the culture and the society that we live in now, like you mentioned earlier, Bob. So having the reassurance that what's covered, what's not covered is definitely the best way. Definitely the best way to go. So
it's interesting that not just from that perspective, but you almost have to think about certain churches and say, when's the last time you actually even had a conversation with your attorney? Frankly. And then for some, when's the last time you reviewed your policy and your coverage and what you're actually paying for and what is and is not covered, and weighed against your current operations? Because churches evolve and change and grow, and they don't often review their policy because it just comes in, it's an email amongst 100 other emails, and somebody who may have reviewed it last year is no longer there in that position. Therefore, maybe they don't even look at it. And so this is something that should be part of an annual plan that says, review your coverage, make sure that you're taking adequate time to understand, is it suitable for what you're currently doing as a ministry? And then also, are there areas that you perhaps should seek additional coverage? And then what sort of legal guidance do you need at the time? So you should put this on a calendar and make sure that this is something that you start talking at least 90 days ahead of that renewal.
For sure.
And I think that the insurance company will probably have lawyers on their team too that may already have model policies that they could share. The model policies are just that. They won't necessarily fit like a glove, but with a little bit of tweaking, they'll work. And you don't necessarily have to start with a blank Word document and a keyboard.
For sure.
Right.
And I know we have our church insurance company is represented by Brotherhood Mutual, and they have attorneys on staff that if you have written your own policy for free, part of their services, they'll review it and make sure that everything is up to code, up to standards, and there's no issues with that. We actually, in our situation for the church that Bob and I attend, actually one of the pastors and I wrote the policy years ago before they even had the models and the templates. And so I sent it to him the end of last year. And I said, can you guys just review this and tell me if something needs to be changed or if we're on good footing here? And they came back and they said, no, you guys are great. You did a fantastic job. So the fact that you have an attorney or an insurance agent say that to me is encouraging, because those are the folks that are going to go to bat for you if something bad happens. So,
and that's a process. I'm sure for some, they write the policy after you have those conversations with your attorney and with your insurance agent, and sometimes you're drafting that policy at that point. Some may have two. They may have their coverage and they may have their policy that they're now trying to merge and look at. Okay, is there need that wasn't in the draft on the basis of things we do, or is there things in the policy that we need to now make with coverage limitation? In other words, drafting a policy about operational procedure that says this is how we're going to handle this type of situation because of the way what crosses the line from insured versus uninsurable.
For sure. Okay, so let's keep moving. So the second question that I wanted to throw out to you, Bob, was what is I get asked this often, but what is an agent of the church? What does that mean? And why is it important from a legal or maybe even a law enforcement standpoint to make that distinction with folks in your church?
Right. So there's the agency doctrine, and basically that if something happens, there's a lot of agents within any organization. And so you think of any kind of corporate structure, the CFO is not the CEO, but still carries a lot of authority. And if they put out a memo, they put out an email, the company's going to follow it, as opposed to somebody that's on the front lines. If they put out a change of policy, that's not necessarily going to be effective, but yet they could go outside the company and talk and maybe represent the company. Then they may be an agent of that. So that's what agency law is, that somebody that is speaking on behalf of the company. So in this case, what we're talking about is somebody that's talking on behalf of the church, and your security team has to be agents within the church. And how does one become an agent? Well, one becomes an agent from the standpoint that it's going to be in writing by the church. And I think this is a good time for me to make a bit of a legal statement myself. So what I'm providing today is legal information. It's not
Sure.
legal advice. I am an attorney. I'm a licensed attorney in the state of Ohio. But even for those Ohio people, I am an attorney. I'm just not your attorney. So we are not establishing an attorney-client relationship by this broadcast or podcast. So what the agent does? So there should be a list within the church that who is actually an agent. And it's going to be obviously all the assistant pastors or associate pastors. And then when you get to the security team, they have to be agents. And so the actual definition from the Black's Law Dictionary is a person authorized by another, who would be the principal, who's typically the pastor, or in some churches it may be the board. And that's to act for or in place of him or her. So the agency doctrine, let's just say that you form a security team and you put Bob Meter in charge of the security team, and I'm on the security team, and then I know James has got a background and Mike's got a background. I'm like, hey guys, want to be on the security team? Yeah, we want to be on the security team. Okay, you're on the security team. And then we have that incident where we got to remove somebody because, the pastor's talking, and we have some protesters that come in or somebody acting out. You're like, hey, you got to leave. And they're like, yeah, I don't want to leave. And they say, yeah, you got to leave. And I don't want to leave. And then it gets physical. And ultimately, when it gets to court, we'll say, well, where does it say that James or Mike, or James and Mike, or Bob, Mike, and James are on the security team? We're like, well, it was back in 2015. We sat down. We said, hey, we're forming a security team. And you have notes from that meeting? No, we don't have any notes from that meeting. After that, we went down and we had pizza. And then from there, we just started showing up on Sundays. And then we got these radios. And okay, but where does it say that Pastor Smith has given you authorization that you're an agent? So I'm kind of taking it, I'm being a little lighthearted with it, but I'm very confident that that's the way many security teams are formed, is they just sit around the table and they're like, okay, we're the security team. My buddy's sister, she makes polos, and we can get the church emblazoned on the polo, and it says security, safety, and security. Well, yeah, that's not being an agent. Now ultimately, I think the courts would say you represented yourself as an agent, but that can get, you don't remember, the less doctors and the less lawyers we have in our life, the simpler our life is. So you always want to try to take care of that in advance. You don't want to try to prove that Bob, Mike, and James were all part of the security team. But the agency doctrine will say that Pastor Smith has authorized Bob, Mike, and James to be the security team. It's on file. It's regularly updated because, as we know, people come and go. And then, I know that in the past you've talked about training. We're going to have to train these folks. We're going to have to document that training. In fact, that's I don't even know at whatever point that James, because I come to church in my police uniform. I don't even know when he found out I was an attorney, but all of a sudden he said, hey, we're doing a training day. And I actually had a class that I presented for others, and I was able to tweak it and give it for the church security team. And then we even took that one step further and went physical with it. So we did some physical training. So, but that's documented. We know who was there. We know how long the training was. And of course, none of it was last year because it was last year. But actually, I did pull up. The last training we did that I did was in December of 19. So,
yep.
Was that the one we did at the police academy?
No, that was the one that we did at the church.
Right. Okay.
You spoke and I spoke.
Right. There were some other people that spoke too, I think. But yeah, that wasn't a physical training. But we still documented who was there, what the training was about, and so when that comes up in what we call discovery, we'll be able to produce those documents.
And that's definitely something I think is unique, certainly for safety and security teams, because for those that are, I would say, doing it the right way, i.e. operating it as a fully functional ministry within the church, that they're just treating it like yet another ministry. And I can't necessarily think of another group or another ministry in most churches. Yes, there's probably some, especially those that are more external or have outreach or perhaps are speaking or operating at prisons or other sorts of things. but most ministries on a church basis probably don't have agency in that sense. They're there, they're serving, they're part of a team, but they're not authorized to speak on behalf of the church.
Well, and that assumption, honestly, and I'm just being honest and transparent, that's how we operated our safety and security for years. Bob's laughing because he knows it's true, but he and I think at one point we sat down and we sat down with some of the pastors, and I don't remember when that was. It was several years ago, and we kind of said, okay, what do we need to, as a whole, like as a whole ministry, as a whole entity, what do we need to do? What are recommendations to improve stuff? Like what are some bullet points of things that we definitely need to work on and focus on? And one of the things that that Bob mentioned right off the bat was, hey, do these guys and gals that are serving, do they have any authority to act on behalf of the church? And we all kind of looked at, I remember it well, we all kind of looked at each other around the table and were like, well,
sure we do.
Yeah, I trust James with making decisions based on what? Based on his experience, based on this, based on that. But at that point, we realized that it was like, okay, we are behind the 8 ball on this, and we need to fix it quickly. And one of those, I guess, aha moments where we said, you know what, here's the reality of it. Someone needs to be able to make a decision in the best interest of the church when your pastor isn't available to make that decision. And, you might not think about that, but if your pastor is up on stage preaching and something happens, then who's going to make that ultimate judgment call on behalf of the best interests of the church? And that individual needs to be, or individuals need to be trusted. And, that needs, that credibility needs to be established so that pastors are comfortable saying, you know what, when I'm behind my pulpit, this is what's going on. I'm preaching, I'm focused on this. And, you're handling and you're keeping an eye on everything else to make sure everything's running smoothly and there's no issues with that. And to be perfectly honest, and we may have time to chat about it here in a little bit, but we had a situation not too long after that it basically came back down to Bob and I making decisions on the fly. And I don't say on the fly like ill-planned, but we had a situation where we had to address it. And so that made all the difference in the world because, we were able to do it that much more efficiently and make decisions without having to go grab people and do that sort of thing. So.
And I think there's 2 degrees there. I mean, you got to have what's documented for purposes of legal and, to your point, Bob, discovery. And so that list is at least there, but there's got to be a broader discussion internally as to say, well, what does that truly mean? Yes, they can act, but what are those actions? And when are those actions then warranted? And what triggers then invite those actions to then be the response? And so all of those things, I think, need to be a discussion that certainly is had. But I look at this and say many may document a list or not be required to document a list for their insurance. They just actually acknowledge the fact that they have a volunteer team. Those volunteers are essentially quasi-employees operating on behalf of, but may not have agency in that true extent. This is a layer above for those that are watching. This is a layer of more detail of legal protection that you want to make sure that is clearly spelled out with yourself. If you're just, you're just serving on a safety team, you want to make sure that the church acknowledges not just that, hey, here's a shirt and yay, we appreciate that you're serving on Sunday, but you actually have the ability to do this. This is not pouring a cup of coffee for somebody. And I think that's the difference. The level of responsibility that the individual takes when joining a safety team is not simply strapping on a gun and showing up on Sunday morning. There's a lot behind the scenes that I think a lot of people don't think about.
Right, and I think that goes back to what you referenced, which I didn't even get to, is about your policies, and that's why you start with the insurance company and you find out what those like you said, what are they allowed to do, to what level can they do it. I just always tend to think of when the security team has to tell someone to get out, and that's you have. Yes, the church is private, but then you're potentially entering into the Constitution. And James, I think it's good. This may be a good time to unpack what happened. I think from a practical application, you had a couple more questions for me, but I don't know if we want to give about 2 minutes here and get to that story.
Yeah, let's go ahead. What we can do, let's go ahead and take a quick break, and we'll come back, and then we'll jump in that story, and then we can move forward. So if you're listening at home, we're talking to Robert Bob Meter. He joined us, Esquire. He joined us tonight, and we're talking about legal considerations for your church safety or security team. We will be back in just a minute, so stay with us. Don't go anywhere.
With over 50 years of experience with religious and nonprofit organizations, Thomas Alexander Insurance & Associates understands that your congregation is different from a traditional business. We're here to fulfill your needs, coming to you while creating a personal plan for your budget and size. From your local community to around the globe, we are advocates for you. Thomas Alexander Insurance & Associates, your partner in service.
The worst has happened. Evil has invaded the sanctuary. Lives were ended, and the life of every surviving member of your church has changed forever. There will be funerals to attend. The grieving and the counseling will go on for years to come. You may even lose church members, especially if your pastor was killed during the attack. But what if I told you that all of this could have been prevented with the proper training? That your church could learn how to secure its campus and how to see the signs of an attack before it happens. At Shield Force International, we will teach you the skills you need to protect your church, to protect your children, to mitigate and even eliminate would-be threats to your church body, all before it happens. We can no longer pretend that evil doesn't exist, or that churches aren't targets. Attacks against churches and pastors are on the rise. Call or visit us online for a free consultation.
Leading a church safety and security team requires more than showing up on Sunday mornings. It requires competent, engaging leadership. To operate a successful church safety and security team, it must be built on a solid biblical foundation, be driven by a thorough system or structured framework, and repeated consistently. Have you been tasked with starting or running a team? Have you inherited an existing team that needs a leader? Do you feel like you are running in circles or burned out executing tasks weekend after weekend? Then you need the all-new book from James McGarvey and Mike Scully, Engage, Train, and Retain, Embracing the Church Safety and Security Lifecycle to take your team beyond Sunday mornings. The Church Safety and Security Lifecycle is a 6-phase system created by the Church Safety Guys specifically for leaders serving in church safety or security teams. It offers a practical leadership model so leaders can engage and inspire their volunteers, train and influence their team, and retain their talent so leaders can thrive, not just survive, so leaders can succeed, simplify their focus, and truly impact church ministry. This is not simply a startup checklist to do once. This is a repeatable framework of learning, discipleship and understanding, and applying a heart of ministry in church safety and security. Pick up the new Church Safety Guys book, Engage, Train, and Retain today, and take your team beyond Sunday mornings.
Church Safety Guys is a nonprofit organization dedicated to help inspire, influence, and impact church safety and security teams. We are about all things church safety and security, which starts with a ministry mindset and a servant's heart. We're protectors, guardians, ambassadors, and shepherds. We help church and place of worship safety and security teams all over the United States through our broadcasts, online communities, conferences, trainings, resources, and products. Help us reach more churches in impactful ways by considering becoming a monthly ministry partner. $2, $5, $20 a month will help us continue to provide these resources.
All right, welcome back to the Sunday night broadcast of the Church Safety Guys. Mike and I are here today with guest Robert Meader, Esquire, and we're talking about legal considerations for your church safety and security team. Paul is actually out of town tonight, so he couldn't be with us, and I'm sure he's regretting it or streaming it online as he drives. But anyhow. Again, Bob, thanks for joining us tonight. And you wanted to jump into talking about the faithful day that we got to know each other better.
Right. Well, I think what it does is it applies application to what we've been talking about. And we
Sure.
could talk about this for a long time. And I know time is tight, but I think that we should go through the story and then maybe back up and talk about the things that were in place that made it work. So
Sure.
I think that it's best if you lead off, since of all days, I was tardy to church by about 5 minutes, and James, of course,
You'll
has my
never-
phone number
You'll
and was
never live
texting
the
and calling and was
You'll never-
so I knew something was different today. On that day. So I'll let James set it up, because
Sure.
I walked in, and then, and again, for your listeners and viewers, I go to church in my police uniform. The church is within my jurisdiction of the city of Columbus, and I do that every Sunday, and then I direct outbound traffic, and then I leave from there. So I am there for really the security part, but my every Sunday I do traffic control as the church empties out onto a main surface road in Columbus. So with that, James, I think you should just tell the story about why you were calling my phone.
Sure. So I wrote about this in the book that we just released, Engage, Train, and Retain, and I kind of left a lot of it out, obviously for certain reasons, for privacy reasons and that sort of thing. But the story's in there. So I wasn't. We have a rotational schedule for our team. I wasn't on the schedule that day, believe it or not. And so what happened was we were running. We're one of the few churches in Southeast Columbus that actually ran a bus ministry, and so we had a bus ministry, and I had just grabbed a cup of coffee. I was walking through the church, and one of the guys on our safety team called me, and he was blowing up my phone, and he said, "Hey, I need you to come out to the bus for a second." And I said, "Okay." So I jogged across the church. I walked outside, and I got on the bus, and there was a woman there that had just started coming to the church, and she was in tears. She was crying. And two of my safety team members were with her, and I said, okay, hi, I'm James. What can I do to help you? What's going on here? And so she told me the story. She had been, several years before, she had been approached by individuals, and there had been an attempt at kidnapping. And they had, I believe, if I understand the story or remember the story correctly, they had actually abducted a friend of hers. So the two women were walking. They grabbed one. They tried to grab her. They couldn't. She escaped. She went and called the police. The police responded. And I believe what happened, the police ended up, through a course of time, catching those two individuals. And so fast forward a little bit of time, she had moved several locations to kind of get away from these individuals and their families and whatnot. And so she had been drawn to our church by one of the Easter dramas. And so she came to church, she got saved, she decided she wanted to start bringing her kids to church. And so she started doing that. And this particular Sunday, she went to get on the bus, and an individual that she recognized as a relative of one of those two guys approached her as she was getting on the bus. And so she kind of had a meltdown, but she was like, get away from me. I don't want to have anything to do with you. So she came to church, and she was really upset at that point about this family approaching her. And we really didn't, honestly, I still had my cup of coffee in my hand. So in my mind, I'm thinking this is just going to be kind of chat through. Nothing's going to happen. We're going to be fine. And so I talked with her, a little bit, was able to calm her down, asked if I could pray with her. And she said, absolutely. So I think the 4 or 5 of us on the bus prayed. And we went to get off the bus and to go into the church, into the service. And she said, I'm really concerned because they said they were going to follow me here. And that kind of caught my attention. And I said, wait a second, how, tell me about that. How did they say that? And she said, well, they noticed the name of the church on the side of the bus. And so, you know what? Google's a great resource, right? So she said, they're going to track me. They're going to find me. And I said, you know what? I said, I don't think they're going to do that, but go ahead, sit in the service. We shifted gears a little bit. I spoke to the gentleman that was in charge, that day of the safety team. And, we actually had someone sit with her, a safety team member sit with her through the service. And so at that point, because of the concern and because of the threat, our senior pastor was actually in the Philippines, and he wasn't around at that point. That's kind of the point when I started calling and blowing up Bob's phone, because I'm thinking, you know what, it's better safe than sorry, right? So, and he said, hey, I'm on my way. I'm running a few minutes late, but I'll get there and we'll talk more. So I kind of gave him a rundown and not so abbreviated history of of what was happening and this story and situation. But what it came down to was within minutes, this family had decided to show up at the church, and their whole intention when I researched it, and of course talking to Bob, was that the next day, this was Sunday, the next day, those individuals were to go before the judge. And so when we pieced all of this story together, we basically came up with, look, what is happening here is this family of individuals that have been charged with this have come to the church to try and find this individual and intimidate her or connect with her in a way that she could possibly alter or withdraw her testimony. And I don't know. I certainly don't know the law as well as Bob does, and I know a lot of firearm law, et cetera. But I'm like, you know what? This doesn't sound right. And so I'll never forget when I'm like talking this back to Bob on the phone. He's like, well, that's witness tampering. That's against the law. And so I'm like, okay, well, yeah, that then it kind of clicked in my mind. And so the folks got there, and I remember going up to two of the individuals. We had them sit in the back of the church. We found them seats. Two of the individuals came up to me, and I'm about 5'9". Both of those guys were like 6'3", 6'4". And so they're towering over me and probably 3 times my size. And I leaned back, I stepped back, and I said to one of the guys, look, I said, we don't want any issues here. If you want to talk to an individual or talk to a pastor, you're welcome to after the service, but to get there, you need to sit through the service. And so they said, look, we'd like to talk to that individual. And I said, well, I'm not guaranteeing that at all, but you need to sit through the service. So they said, okay, we're not trying to cause problems. We'll sit through the service. So they did. And that's pretty much to the point where Bob came in and I said, we kind of talked about it. So I'll throw it over to you at that point.
Right. Well, and what the suspects, I only remember one suspect, but he had not only kidnapped, but sexually assaulted multiple different women. None of the victims were available. And that was what the prosecutor, when I talked to them, they were very concerned because none of the other witnesses or victims were available. She was the last one. And so they would articulate that they wanted to come and pray with her to have her forgive him because he was getting sentenced the next day. He had taken a plea bargain and he was going to get sentenced. And so that's when James said, well, they just want to come and pray and ask for forgiveness. And I said, well, that's an F3 witness intimidation of a crime witness. And so anyhow, we developed a plan, and they wanted to talk to her. At that point, she was out of the sanctuary. You had put her back in a safe location in the church, which was a really good move. And then I called some of my friends with the police department and multiple, and we put them in. We had classrooms that were empty during the service and put them in there. And then I went around the corner, and James and the security team said, okay, she's ready to meet with you. And they were very excited about that. And then they got up and they walked into the classrooms where the officers were there, and we detained them based upon the felony that they were in the process of committing. And what I think that's important there is that had they been removed in a struggle or what have you, because we're going to protect that young lady, then James and the security team had the authority. They were agents of the church. They had been trained. I was at scene, so had it gone violent, you at least had an extra set of hands, and we had some of my friends that were there too at the church at that point. So I think that to help underscore what you guys are trying to accomplish here is that after you get your team formalized, you should always reach out to local law enforcement and try to sit down with them and see what their expectations are. If they have maybe a liaison that works with the churches, and even if they don't, you talk to a shift supervisor. You probably want to talk to the first shift supervisor and the second shift supervisor because you have evening events, and just talk to them and maybe touch base with them a couple times a year. You have a big event at the church, invite the officers over. Tell them in advance so that they can send a car over. Law enforcement's always looking for positive community outreach. And that's a great way to do it. They don't have to do anything. They just got to show up, and the community's already there. And so that's the way you want to start to develop that relationship with local law enforcement. And because of that worked beautifully. And then that night, just to put a bow on it, we were able to get her secured at a hotel, and then went in the next day. And I think he pled to 13 years. So he was looking at some serious time. And so their mission was their relative, and they loved him. And irrespective of the recidivist felon that he was, they didn't want him going to prison. And that's where he's safely at right now.
And I mean, there was certainly a lot of moving parts with everything. and several different aspects. I know one of the individuals that came had a pretty extensive history with law enforcement, and not in a good way. And for sure, there was a lot of I wouldn't say necessarily drama, but I think there was a lot from the woman's perspective. There was just a lot of moving parts, and certainly she didn't know how we were going to respond. She didn't know about a safety team, what that means or anything like that. But the reality of it was, you know what, we had the opportunity. We took care of her the best we could. We removed her kids safely. We had people with her. We had people with the kids, and I think that that helped as well. So, Mike, you were going to jump in there.
Yeah, I think the amazing story. I mean, first off, is now I get to meet the face behind the story, because James and I had certainly talked about that when the book was in process, and I remember bits and pieces of it. But I think the big part there is that the established relationship that James, you had, and others had, whether it be with Bob and others on the department, with the local church here, in that sense, ahead of this incident. So that the first time somebody in uniform was arriving on the steps of the church for some sort of call, it wasn't like, all right, who's this church safety guy? Okay, and does he have authority? They're not asking that. They're there to solve a problem. They're on an active call. So at that point, it's too late to try to be building relationship as they're coming in hot, so to speak. So I just really comment on that, is that the establishment of that, and Bob, you referenced it, I think a lot of community affairs divisions, certainly with many city departments, I'm not sure how many from a sheriff's department perspective potentially have that outreach there, but many have a community affairs arm, or they'll have a branch that deals directly with the outreach of the local PD. They do the things like the coffee with a cop and the block parties in August and other sorts of things, National Night Out. So those are the types of departments that you want to start with if you have nowhere to start. And then from there, as Bob mentioned, reach out further, is try to actually understand who's got the beat of your church, who typically covers Sunday mornings in your district, and understand who the likely first responding officer might be if you have an active call on a Sunday morning. And it's good to know that, but it's also good to know the supervisors and what's going on there. And that way they know about it before on this perspective, them in and getting to know your building and lots of different aspects of that relationship once you establish it. So just wanted to comment on it, because that could have played out a heck of a lot different without that relationship.
Oh, it could have, and I think one of the things too, and I think I did a video, and I know Paul did a video a couple of weeks ago about the same topic. But one of the things too is just remember that, law enforcement, as much as they want to serve and want to be a positive presence in the community, relationships go much further. So if I have my relationship with Bob has, hopefully he finds me a trustworthy, incredible individual, but getting to know him on a regular basis before something happened, he knows that if I call him and something's odd, then, okay, we have the puzzle to solve here, or something's not right, versus, I don't call, like I wouldn't call Columbus Police, or I wouldn't call them or any law enforcement agency and be like, hey, you need to come to our church. You need to do this. You need to train us. You need to, because they have enough going on already. And obviously, like we've talked about before, they, with culture being the way it is, they're underfunded, underpaid, and certainly often not respected as the hardest job in America. So, developing a relationship, or starting a relationship with individuals is always probably an easier way of connecting with law enforcement and having them come in. And if you can establish that relationship, then, it would certainly be mutually beneficial. So
One other small point here is that our church physically is very large. James, how many square feet is it? Do you know?
it's about 150,000 square feet.
Right. And so one of the things that I encouraged James to do, which took a little bit of time, was to get every door numbered or lettered. And just because and it's probably a little more for EMS because they're going to be more common at the church. But if you have one of those really bad situations, what door do you want them going to? You want them going to the C door on the west side of the building or what have you.
Yep.
But we have a lot of doors to our church, and James got that done. That was well done by James. But yeah, I saw that as something that we needed to get done because an officer just coming there, even though you may have a connection to the officer, he or she might be off that day. You might have somebody that doesn't normally work that area. When they get there, you go to the west side of the church, the door letter C, and
Well, we have,
as I would often joke, even fire departments can figure that out.
Yeah.
Well, and that can be notated in the file too. I think a lot of I know a lot of police departments will actually take that dispatch down for a certain address, phone number, things like that, where they know any sort of incident that's occurring at this premises. Here's some background notes and so forth to that. So dispatch can let responding officers know, hey, this is the nature of this incident. Go to the Charlie door.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. Very good.
And yeah, we've done, or we've worked on that and done that. And I know we've had responding agencies. Actually, Madison Township responded to a medical emergency, and I asked the officer in charge if they got that. Like, we specifically said, "Hey, come to this door." And I said, "So when you received the dispatch, did it say that?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, absolutely." He's like, "You've got 22, which we do, 22 doors on the outside of the building." He's like, "So it saved me a lot of time trying to figure out where to get and how to get there quickly." So for sure. Well, for sake of time, I'll throw one last question out from one of our listeners that just came in. Bob, do you think there's a valid reason to use the term security or safety to define your team and define your ministry?
I don't really think that the title of it is going to have that great of an impact. I think that's something more for your insurance company, what they would like it titled at. What are they going to cover? I guess you wouldn't want to call it the outreach ministry team because that's not going to really, frame it as to what it is. But I mean, I would definitely work with your insurance company, but calling it a specific finite title from a legal standpoint, I don't think that it's going to matter. It's going to matter about the policies, the procedures, and how you interact.
Sure.
I think the added component there is one unique thing is here in the state of Texas, the legislature has specifically gone out of their way to actually define church security and the security aspect. And for the longest time, until I think about 2 years ago, it was actually, unless you had a licensed, trained team, you could not actually call yourself a security team. And so officially it was a safety team. They've pulled back on that. I think the law changed in 2019 slightly. So in a volunteer capacity, non-paid, I think there's an opening to be able to still use that term, but also understand that while there may not be a legality in your state, or there may not be something related to your insurance policy or some specific legal reason, there may be reasons behind it. If you think about the term, we use them pretty interchangeably, but to me, safety is more encompassing than just security. In the sense is that safety is kind of the umbrella. Security is one of the operations or one of the things that you might do under the umbrella of safety. You also want to look at it from a perspective, what is the persona of your church? What type of neighborhood, what type of location are you? Are you an inner city church? Are you not? what does the connotation of a safety team tell your potential volunteers versus a security team? What is the charge and scope of your team that you're allowing them to do? What agency are you giving your team? Are you fully allowing them to do that? Because to me, that's a completely different spectrum of, are you responding to cuts and bruises, slips and trips, and lost children? Or are you dealing with disruptions, ejecting somebody who may have been formerly trespassed in the past, or worse? Are you dealing with active threats? And there's a full degree of that, and it can still all fall under safety.
Well, and one subtle point there is that if you're transitioning or you have different people in charge of different parts, all of your paperwork, from what the pastor budgets on the line item budget, to your policies and procedures, to your uniforms, and I don't know if we call them uniforms, but their uniformity, all that should be consistent. One shouldn't say safety, one shouldn't say security. That should all be, that should all be congruent throughout. So that it's
Absolutely.
not all, especially if you're transitioning, you change church names, whatever, and one church called it one thing, you're calling different. There's different documentation. Make sure it's all consistent. Very important.
That's great.
And all those policies and procedures should be dated. They just shouldn't be there. You should, that gives a clue as to when they were last reviewed and updated and signed off on by the pastor. And every time you change pastors, not assistant pastors, but the primary pastor, all those things need to be updated with the new pastor.
Yep. Yes. Almost a version control, even beyond just a date. I like to see a true version control for each policy. And while it may not necessarily all be a single document, you may have an individual policy that can change. It'd be good to understand that and say, okay, as of this date, this is how it changed, and maintain that. It shouldn't be a Word doc stored somewhere digitally that keeps getting updated and you lose the old version because you overwrote it. There should be versioning of it, and know that, okay, we evolved the policy. Here's the context, but then also for background, store something maybe not in the document, but the context. What was it that caused the resulting change? Why did we change this policy? Where did that come from? So that 3-4 years, new pastor, whatever down the line, new security director, understand the context under which that policy was applied, because otherwise you may either unwind it or not understand the true spirit of why that policy was updated.
Right. And like the law you referenced in Texas would be that, would be that reason, potentially. Yep. For that change of policy. So they wouldn't want to change it back because, there's a state law that says we have to do this. So yes, very, very good. You're spot on.
Cool. Well, I would love to have you chat longer with us, but for sake of time, we need to wrap stuff up. But again, thank you, Bob, for your time today and for jumping in and being willing to hang out with us. We appreciate it.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks, Bob.
Do you want actually in closing, how if anybody has a question or they're interested in your blog or website, how would they find you?
So like the church safety guys, I have a niche too, and my niche is arrest, search, and seizure for Ohio law enforcement. So I know you're reaching many states here. Hopefully you're reaching all 50, but mine's just for the great state of Ohio, and it is objectivelyreasonable.com. And I'll repeat that, objectivelyreasonable.com. And I regularly post blog posts on legal updates for Ohio cops. And there's some in there that would fit for national law enforcement, but mine is focused on Ohio law enforcement, and you can get a hold of me through that website.
All right.
Thank you.
Sounds good. All right. So real quick, next week, I think just to wrap up, next week, I think we have a recording. Actually, Mike and Paul and I got a chance to talk to Jason and Heather White. So we'll be playing their recording. And the Whites are actually in Florida. They have a ministry where they help missionaries with being prepared, emergency preparedness. And they do help churches as well. But crazy situation. I believe Mike was actually a U.S. Marshal, and his wife was a CSI technician, and they actually met before they were married on a crime scene, and got married, and then have an awesome family, and are serving as pastors down at a church in Florida. So we'll have that recording next week, and I am going to be on the road next week in Tennessee and Virginia. So taking a break. So hopefully I'll get some sleep more than Mike. Hopefully Mike will get some sleep too.
I'm sure you will. You get some nice fresh air in the mountains.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. We're planning on going to the Smoky Mountain area and then Virginia Beach. So I think it'll be
nice.
I think it'll be a lot of fun. But anyhow, for more resources, please feel free to like and share. Share the broadcast. If you're looking for a particular topic or information on a topic, you can always visit our YouTube channel because we have all of our previous recordings on there. Share it with your teams, and if we can ever help you out in any way, please feel free to reach out to us through our website at churchsafetyguys.com, and we will do our absolute best to help you, or we get a lot of folks that reach out and just want to talk, and that's great too. Like how do we handle this situation, or I have this type of situation going on with my team. How can I best handle it? So we're here for you all, and we're just blessed to be able to minister in this capacity. So other than that, Mike, you want to add anything before we?
No, I think it's great. I think, and that's one of the best parts about what we get to do here, and we're blessed to be able to have that opportunity to help people, and that they're reaching out and seeking that guidance and input, and certainly we relish the opportunity to not only serve our churches but serve together from this capacity on this broadcast and reaching others. So by all means, you got a question, feel free and reach out. We're happy to chat.
Sounds good. All right. Well, we will see you next week. So until next time, take care, have a great week, and God bless.
Thank you for joining the Church Safety Guys broadcast. We hope that you found it informative, and we appreciate your feedback. Looking for ways you can help us reach more churches? Share our broadcast with your teams. Consider becoming a monthly ministry partner. Like and share our page, and join the discussion in our Facebook groups. Visit our website at churchsafetyguys.com for other great resources. Remember to keep a servant's heart, a mindset of ministry, and Semper Disciplina. Always be training. Have a blessed week.